Tony and David. How are y'all?
We're doing great, Sampson.
Doing great, Sampson. How are you?
We got to start this by asking the question that we ask everybody, and that is, how long have y'all been together, and how did y'all first meet?
Okay, so we first met. I was going to a party with a group a group of friends, and I'm not a big partier. I've never been a big partier, and so I've been invited out to go to this party, and I went against my will, right? And I was really peeved, right? I get to the party before my friends do. I'm sitting in the car waiting on them to arrive, and they finally get there. We get to the door, and we are there to see someone we knew. We knew someone, the host of the party. I knew him. He had come around me and my group of friends, and he had invited us. And I didn't want to go, but I relented because I really liked this person who had invited us. So we go. We get to the door, and this one opens the door as if he's the host. And so I'm immediately annoyed, right? Because it's like, he don't even live here. Why is he opening this door? You know, this is rude, right? So he is in his happy-go-lucky mood, which is typical of Tony. He's extremely happy-go-lucky. And he says something like, to me directly, "Oh, you have a nice ass."
Right off the bat?
Right off the bat. Oops. And I was so mad, right? Like, I don't think I've ever been that mad before. Before that point, I've been madder since, but I don't think I've ever been that mad before that, right? So I said to my friends, I said, keep him away from me. And I meant it. Keep him away from me. And so we go into the party, and he takes that as a challenge, right? And he is picking with me all night, you know, hey, what's going on? And, you know, that kind of thing. And I didn't want to be bothered. This was right at the time of like Facebook being a thing, but it was before DMs were coined as DMs. You could send private messages, but they weren't called, you know, DMs back then, right?
Quit dating us.
I'm just saying, they weren't, that's not what they were back. So he sends a message, and he's like, so when you gonna stop playing and let me take you out on a date? And I didn't want to go out on a date with him. So I ignored him. I ignored him for several months. I did. And then this was around the time where Facebook was allowing you to now add comments on posts. And so he began to comment on my posts. And I was so irritated. I was like, leave me alone, right? And so I forget when we finally got to it, and he says something to the effect of, you need to stop being so uptight and just let me take you out. And I say something to my best friend at the time, and I'm like, this guy really wants to take me out. I don't know whether or not I should go. And we go, and it is the worst date ever.
Dull.
It is. We're sitting at this amazing restaurant in Franconia, Springfield, Virginia.
That was the first mistake.
It was a really nice restaurant, though. It was a really nice restaurant. He asked me what I liked. I liked Italian food. He was thoughtful. He took me to this Italian restaurant. But when I got there and I'm sitting across from him, when I first met him, I was so incensed by like the initial introduction, I never actually took him in, the fullness of him, right? And as I'm sitting across from him, I'm saying to myself at the table, like, bitch, you had no business being here. This man is fine, right? Like, that's what I'm saying to myself, right? Like, why does he want to go out with me? Like, that's what I'm telling myself. Like, and so I can't find the words during the date because I don't want to embarrass myself. Because as I'm sitting there, I'm literally sitting at the table like, bitch, how you get here? Like, you don't belong at this table at all. So I couldn't talk, couldn't find my way there. So the date was dull, as he mentioned, and we didn't talk. He did come back once, and I didn't say nothing. And then some messages came back and forth again on Facebook, and we did that song and dance for a little while. And then he invited me out again, this time to a hibachi grill place. And he acted a plum fool at that hibachi grill, just people with people. And, you know, at a hibachi grill, it's you and a whole bunch of people around the table. And so everybody's there to have a good time. And I had decided at that point that the first date was horrible. So with no reason for me to try to be somebody like just go with it,
Yeah.
right? Just go with it, and I did. And I would say we had an amazing date that time, because I had a good time, and we went home. I went home with him that night. We went to a hibachi grill place, real close to his house, and that was all I needed. After that, so we went back and forth doing this little song and dance for a while, just kind of meeting up with each other, going out here and there and stuff like that. And then I was living in Baltimore. I had just finished grad school. I was in my second year of my doctoral program, and he was coming up to see me on the weekends, or I was coming down to Virginia to see him.
I was in Alexandria.
He was in Alexandria. Yeah. And so we were doing like this back and forth thing. And right before his birthday, he was going on a cruise for his birthday. And he says to me, well, what are we doing? And we just laying in bed. I'm like, I don't know. Right? This seems fun to me, right? And so he says, well, this is good, but when I come back, we together. And
it's all she wrote.
It really is. After that, it really was. We were together and have been together ever since. I met him when I turned 25. We did the back and forth thing for 2 years. And then, so around the time I turned 27, we were in a relationship, and I'm 38 today. So it's been a while.
And
Okay.
marriage was October 18, 2014.
So Tony, I gotta ask you, because I mean, there's so much. So this person did not want to have anything to do with you, told you he ain't want to have nothing to do with you, ignored your messages, played in your face in Franconia, Springfield. What made you continue to pursue David?
He, to me, was a very, very handsome dude. He also came across to me as someone who I could build something with, even from that, just seeing that one-off piece when I opened the front door at our friend's house, friend's apartment. And yeah, he shunned me a little bit, but it ended up being a challenge in the aspect it was, he's saying no, but he's still responding. So it was that aspect of a tug of war or push-pull kind of a thing that said, that's what he's saying, that ain't what he wants. So that's why. And once we really connected in an aspect that we could really talk outside of Facebook, face-to-face, it really cemented that there was something special there for us both. And that's it.
David, what made you let your guard down?
It's still up.
After all these years, it's still up a little bit?
Yeah. I think that's the Virgo in me. And I think, there are moments where I am extremely vulnerable, and then there are moments when I am not, right? But I think to directly answer your question, what made me kind of relent was that the persistence to me was super important. And he is right to say that my typing was saying one thing. It really was fear, right? I had to that point never been pursued, right? Nobody had ever pursued me. So I honestly didn't even know what the hell was happening, right? And so you run away from that because you're like, what is this? This seems weird. This is not what I'm used to. And so I will tell you, I saw at the hibachi grill, I saw a man who could at once be the life of the party and be attentive and thoughtful and caring. He made sure I had everything I needed that night. He consistently asked, are you all right? Do you need anything? And I began to realize that this was a man who would protect me from my biggest fears that night. And so I think that really helped cemented for me, and I'm not going to be coy about it. The sex was incredible. Like, I wrote my friend on my, like, when in fact I got out the car, when I left the house, I called my best friend who convinced me to go. I said to that, I said, bitch, thank you, God. Thank you, God. And you know, that definitely was helpful, right? In terms of there was a physical connection, and I think initially an emotional connection that began to chip away at the wall that still, as he mentioned, is still present, but not nearly as high as it used to be.
Yeah, so what the running joke between us is that he always has this wall up, and I'll deal with it one brick at a time if I have to. So that's how we manage our relationship.
So David, how has having someone who's so consistent, I mean, you talked about it a few minutes ago, you know, having somebody who's very consistent and persistent about really focusing on what your needs are. But how has this helped you to overcome certain fears that you have around maybe being vulnerable?
One of the things that is so great about Tony is how he shows up for the people he cares about, right? That's one of his best attributes, I would say. And you know, it's true for his family. It's true for his chosen family, his very close knit group of friends, and it is also true for me. And it is in those moments where I get to see that there is not always a necessity to have the wall up. And you know, as he mentioned, you know, he pulls me out sometimes, and sometimes I retreat, and that is due to the give and take of things that I am managing around and through, right? And similarly, there are things that challenge me with him, right? And there are times where I have to make, we have to mutually make a decision to be that person for each other when the person needs it. Now, for him, it's not a wall necessarily. I don't think I would call what I experience in terms of supporting him a wall. I think it's more, he is extremely cerebral in terms of his intensity in managing himself, and is not as willing to allow for consultation and assistance, right? And so it comes down to, I got it. I don't need that right now. And I think that stems from him always being the person for everybody. And so I have to manage around and understand that it's not personal. It's not about me in that moment. It is him. And I have to accept that that is how he manages and that is how he deals. And I have to love him for that, not in spite of that, but for that, right? That's who he is, right? And as he said, he knows who I am behind the wall, behind the gruff exterior, as it were. And I know who he is when he is in those moments of intense solitude, right? And it's not a time for me to try to infiltrate it. It's a time for me to step back and wait for my moment to come in and be supportive, however that might look in the moment. And it doesn't always look the same.
You talked about sitting at the table and continuously asking yourself, what am I doing here? Mm-hmm. What was that about? And how did you confront that?
It took years for me to even bring it up with him, right? We did not talk about it that night, right? I never mentioned it.
Nope.
Until right, well, he had proposed, and he had asked me during the proposal.
Unconventional proposal, by the way.
It was extremely unconventional. we were getting.
Go on with the story.
Okay, sorry, but it was extremely unconventional. So I say this to say, it was around the proposal time, and we were having this conversation, and he had asked me at some point, you know, why I wanted to marry him, and I said to him at that point, I don't know yet why you want to be with me, right? I think even now it's something I still struggle with, right? I know whom I am, right? I know what I bring to the table. I know the value that I can offer. And we have built an incredible life, I would say, between the two of us. And I've been a big part of that. Like, it's a partnership, right? But what I think I have struggled with, and I think this is true for many people, and I think that's why it's important, I guess, to talk about it, is questioning whether or not I'll ever be enough. So, you know, as I was sitting across the table, thinking to myself, well, okay, he's here. He clearly wants to be with me, but I'm saying in that moment, it's like, well, are you good enough to be sitting at this table? Because like, maybe not, right? Because to that point, I'd had no evidence to support that somebody would want to spend that amount of time with me, right? I didn't have a history of that, or that somebody would make that kind of investment. And I'm not saying that my story is a model or anything, but what I am saying is that there is, if you allow yourself the opportunity to believe that it is possible, it can be, right? And oftentimes what happens in these situations is we're in our own way. And that certainly was true for me in the early goings of the formative years of our relationship. I was questioning consistently, when is he gonna leave? Because I believed that he might.
Well, I gotta ask, when you finally had this conversation with him about that, what was that conversation like? And I can imagine having that conversation did allow a shift to occur in the relationship.
It did, but it allowed me to ask deeper questions regarding him and how he connects with his family. So to me, family is extremely important. And at some point, there was a rift with his immediate family where he felt that there was some abandonment issues. So I think that pushes over into how you interact with people in your life in general. And for me, it ain't the I continue to turn the story where, oh, you're gonna leave me kind of a thing, but it was in the back of his mind, that's really what he thought. His mindset was, well, at some point I'm gonna be alone again. And I had to kind of try to reassure him that that isn't the intent, but if that were to happen 15, 20 years from now, that's what it is. But we're not going into this thinking that it's a definite or defined period of time. This is we're gonna coast this thing to the end, you know.
What has been your biggest challenge as a couple, and how have you overcome that challenge together?
Living together, I am a stickler for order. Former Army, I like things so right. That ain't him. So that still bugs me to this particular day. Something as simple as, if you walked into the kitchen and the cabinet was closed, you opened it to get a cup, but you still leave the cabinet open, that's a problem for me. But those are the little nitpicky, simple things that you learn to live with and just deal with. And it's not something that you need to argue, fuss, and complain about. You just move on. It's like this little simpleton and just go on about your business. So for me, that was it. You know, when you've lived by yourself for such a long period of time, you also have your own way of doing things. And then you have to realize that it's not just you anymore. So you have to learn how to navigate, manage, and live your life encompassing someone else. So that was my challenge for me. And there's some still little things that, you know, still tick me off to this day, but I just check it off like, you know, hey, that was just him. And it is what it is.
Okay.
I'm going to go a different direction. I think with many couples, communication styles is a challenge, and ours are very different. And so I keep things in until I explode. He prefers to address things in the moment. If it's important enough to address things in the moment, as he mentioned, there are things that he just ignores and goes on about. I keep in things until I explode, but I also write my own narratives. And so I make assumptions about things. And so it's like, well, he must be mad about this, but I don't really know. So let me ask. And then that turns into a whole different thing. And so it's about it's about figuring out when is the appropriate time to have the conversation for both of us so that it doesn't turn into a, knockdown, drag out argument. And then also being very selective about what is necessary for the conversation, right? Is it the closed bathroom door, right? He didn't mention that, but that is something that ticks him off more than anything.
Mm-hmm.
The bathroom needs to be closed. And I don't be thinking about closing the damn door behind me when I leave the bathroom, right? It's just two people in this house and a damn dog. Why I gotta close the door? But to him, that's very important, right? And sometimes I'm thoughtful of it. Other times I'm not, right?
More often than not, yeah.
Yeah. And but I think so what I had to learn about myself in those moments is I don't need to write my narrative. I need to accept the fact that if I don't know, it's okay to not know until I'm told what it is, right? That's what I learned about myself, which is important. And it's a very growth building thing. And it's super important in terms of, I think, any relationship. You need to know what your limitations are and what you are bringing to the mess so that you can remove that and declutter that, no pun intended, declutter that so that you can be addressing what the real issue is in the center of the floor. And it isn't the open door. It's more about, feeling like maybe there's a lack of respect for his wants and his needs, right? What his desires are. Because it isn't about the door being open. It's about the fact that he believes that I know that this is an issue for him and I am purposefully ignoring that. And it isn't that at all, right? But that's the perception that it gives because I am aware that that is important to him. But it's just not something that's important to me as much. And so it comes across as, I don't care. Similarly, conversely, let's say it might be important to me for us to do things like when we first moved in together and started doing things, I was very, very adamant about having a date night, right? Concerted time for us to spend with each other every week, right? Because we're busy men, both, successful in our careers and we've got things going on. And I want to make sure that there was dedicated time for us to have with each other, right? Every week. But it turned into a chore.
For me.
And so I felt like in that moment that he didn't care about spending time with me, but he appreciated being more spontaneous and not feeling like it was an obligation. And so, but I felt like in those earlier moments, especially after it became like a big thing and he, I said to him, well, why don't you want to spend time with me? And he's like, it's not that I want to spend time with you. It's a damn chore. Nobody wants to be obligated to go out with you every goddamn Friday. And, but I felt like that was being strategic because who I am as a person is a planner. That's right. Important to me. I like to plan because I don't like disappointment and I don't manage well in those experiences. He is far more spontaneous, as we've discussed, right? Like he'll open the door to somebody's house if you don't live there, right? And that's just who he is. And finding that balance for both of us has been something that we have had to grow into over the course of our relationship.
I think we found it.
Yeah, we have.
Last question. So we end these conversations with a Josephine quote, which is Black men loving Black men is the revolutionary act. Mm-hmm. In your opinions, what makes Black men loving Black men so revolutionary?
That is, in fact, one of my favorite quotes of all time. And it's revolutionary because we are taught from the womb that loving another Black man is undesirable. It is undesirable. We are taught from get that is not acceptable.
Yeah.
Right. And so the choice to choose to be open and loving and to make a public declaration of that is revolutionary because it is breaking down barriers for others who need to see it and do the same. Tony previously mentioned there isn't a representation of a longstanding couple, a representation of a Black, longstanding Black couple in media today. And he's absolutely right about that. Even the men whom we embrace as standard bearers for, Black gay life, or representatives of being great Black gay men, they're not married to other Black men, right? And so the choice to love someone who looks like you when your upbringing and your culture and your community tells you that that is not okay to do is revolutionary simply by the decision to do so.
I would say this, and this is can be very simple. We were always here.
Mhm.
So that's it. And that's it. We were always here.